Hello, my name's Nathan and I work as a terrestrial ecologist. So a large part of my job is actually working with bats. And unfortunately, due to the ongoing pandemic, we were actually unable to get on our bat walk. Now this was through the Causeway Coast and Glens Heritage Trust and also in combination with Mid and East Antrim Borough Council. But fear not, as I'm going to do my best to bring the bats to you. So a really good place to start is, what are bats? So bats are mammals, and for those of you that maybe aren't that sure, so mammals are characterised by the fact that they are warm-blooded. They give birth to live young and they feed that young from milk that they produce. So bats fall into this category because they give birth to live young and their young are called pups. And bats are really unique in the fact that they are our only true flying mammal. Okay, so in Northern Ireland, we have 8 different species of bat, and they're all protected under the Northern Ireland Wildlife Order. So that means that it's an offence to intentionally harm them or disturb them. So this is probably one of our most common species, and Ireland is the stronghold for Leisler's bats. Okay, so the next species, we actually have 3 different kinds of pipistrelle. So we've got the common pipistrelle, and then we have the soprano pipistrelle, and we have Nethusius pipistrelle. And the way that we can differentiate between these two, or these 3 species of bat, is through the frequency at which they call. So common pipistrelle usually emits a frequency around 45. Soprano pipistrelle, which means a little higher, at 55, and Nethusius is down low below the common pipistrelle at 39. Then we have this species, which is my favourite, and this is the brown long-eared bat, and they're really characteristically named after their big long ears, which they use to listen for prey, and this also aids in their foraging technique, as they will often fly around the edges of trees and hedgerows and listen for insects rustling on the leaves, and they actually just pick them off the surfaces of the leaves. Then we have the Myotis species, so we have the natterer's bat. We've got the bentons, which forage over water, and the whiskered bat. Okay, so what about the places where bats live? So I've actually come to my own garden and to the old horse chestnut tree, and I want to show you this. So this is a bat box. So as you can see, it's got these little ladders at the bottom, so that's where the bat will land and scurry up in. So I'm not going to open this to risk disturbing any bats, because bats are protected. But basically, a bat box is somewhere where bats can roost. They will also breed in bat boxes. And if you are erecting a bat box, it's good usually to have it maybe about 10 feet or so off the ground. Have it so that it's south facing if possible. If it's on a wall or a fence, that's fine. Because usually when bats are rearing their offspring, they will choose locations that are south facing, because the heat from the sun helps to speed up the development of their offspring. So I just wanted to show you this, and in the next video I will show you some bats emerging from a house, and you can also see where bats might live in a house. Did you know that bats can eat up to 3,000 midges per night? And that's just one pipistrelle bat alone. Bats are also known as ecological indicator species because where you've got bats, it means that this ecosystem is doing quite well. Okay, so I've come down to the beautiful Carnlough, and you can just see Glenarm in the background there, and I'm actually just in Carnlough Harbour. So I've got my trusty bat logger with me, so let's go find some bats. So unfortunately it's just started to rain, but otherwise conditions are good-ish. It's around 10 degrees, which is ideal for bats, so 10 degrees and higher, usually bats will emerge. Obviously the rain isn't ideal, but we'll hopefully get some, so we'll have to see what we can find. Let's stay hopeful. Okay, so it's just stopped raining, which is good news. So it's now just well after sunset, and the bats will just be getting ready to emerge. So we're going to have a look around some of these trees you can see in the background, because that's probably our best chances of getting some. So unfortunately we didn't have much luck in Carnlough, so we've jumped over now to Glenarm, so hopefully we'll have a bit more luck here. There we go, so our first bat of the night, and it's a soprano pipistrelle. You can hear all the squeaks, they're going crazy. There we go, so I know this is a soprano pipistrelle because its frequency is around 55, and this little guy, oh, it's very dark and hard to see, but there's a line of trees here, and he's just foraging in and around this old ash. Wow, he's going nuts. So all that clicking, basically the bat detector is slowing down the frequency that this little soprano pipistrelle is calling at. So he'll be foraging around this big old ash tree, and there's some sycamore tree here as well. But basically all those little slaps and clicks that you can hear, oh, bat detector doesn't like it when I get a bit too close. That's the bat detector slowing that down so that I can hear. So there we go, 49 calls, 50 calls, and in the past sort of 10 minutes I've been sort of dandering up and down this line of trees, and you can hear all those clicks. There we go. So that's basically, all those little clicks are made by the bats, and that's to detect and locate their prey. So by emitting these little clicks and squeaks, they bounce off of their prey, which would be things like midges and other flying insects. And basically by listening to where those clicks bounce back from, the bats can actually locate their prey. So what happens if you come across an injured bat, or if you find any bats that are in need of help? So you can get in touch with the Northern Ireland Bat Group, of which I'm a member and a volunteer. So the Northern Ireland Bat Group is made up of a series of volunteers and bat carers, and basically we strive to educate the public about bats, and also rescue and rehabilitate any bats that are in need of trouble. So if you come across an injured or grounded bat, you can go on to their Facebook page where you'll find a link, and you fill in an online form, and one of our excellent volunteers will get back to you. So in this next video, I'm going to show you a little bat that had been rescued, and it had been rehabilitated by the people that rescued it, and I had the great privilege of releasing this little common pipistrelle back into the wild. And there's David Attenborough chilling in the background. So what kind of things can you do to attract bats to your garden? So if you're lucky enough to have a hedgerow in your garden, leaving it unmaintained as best as you can is probably the best thing that you can do for bats. So bats will use hedgerows and mature trees as foraging resources, and they will also use them to commute. So if you can leave your hedge unmaintained, whether that means, you know, cutting it later in the year or maybe planting a few sort of native species in the mix, bats will thank you for it. Sorry, I had some very noisy geese in the background there. But yes, as I was saying, leaving your hedgerows unmaintained as best as you can is probably one of the best things you can do, because bats will use those features to move to and from their roosting spots to their foraging spots. So again, planting trees. So this is an oak tree, is another really good thing you can do for bats. Similar to that of the hedgerows, it'll provide foraging resources, and as the tree gets mature, it'll provide a roosting spot. Erecting a bat box is another great thing that you can do for bats, because you're actually giving them somewhere to roost. So this is the one, if you remember, I was talking about earlier, and this is just on the old horse chestnut tree. But again, if you haven't got any trees in your garden, you can erect a bat box onto your house or onto your fence. And there's so many different designs now. This is just a sort of standard wooden box, but you know, you can really go all out depending on sort of your budget. So if you haven't got a hedgerow, or if you haven't got any trees or any room to plant trees, maybe you're just not ready to erect a bat box yet, the number one thing you can do for bats is by planting some pollinator friendly flowers. So this is just the border along the side of my house, and it's filled with snapdragons, cornflowers. These are little cornflowers. It's also got lots of cosmos. Just basically you want a nice mix of late flowering plants, so that this provides a foraging resource for the invertebrates that in turn the bats then feed on. And if you haven't got any room for borders, a simple window box is fine. Okay, so let's have a look at the life cycle of a bat. So I've actually just come down to October, so this is the month that we're in now. And at this time of year, bats are frantically trying to feed and fatten up as much as they can for winter, and this is also their mating season. So if you're out for a walk and you hear lots of squeaks, that's basically the male bats flying around squeaking, showing off to all the females and saying how great they are. So if I scroll back up, this is just the Bat Conservation Trust, which is a really good website, and you can find lots more resources here. But basically at this time of year then, after they've mated, bats will begin to hibernate. So they'll go into a state of torpor, it's called, where they don't really feed and forage. Sometimes they will emerge, but not very often, and they find somewhere nice and cool. So they'll actually hibernate all the way through right to, let's have a look, February. And in March then they start to sort of emerge, although it's very limited. And then once they've emerged, the females will already have mated back in October, if you remember. So they will be pregnant and they'll come out and start feeding heavily. Then in May, the females start to form what are known as maternity colonies, where they'll all cluster together and have their young. And then the mothers look after the babies in June, and they usually just only have the one pup. And they'll look after their pups from June, July, right through to the end of August, and that's whenever the young begin to become dependent, and the maternity colonies start to disperse. And then again, we're back round to September, October, where the young have all left the maternity colonies and the females are looking for love once again. Okay, so we've now come to the end of our bat video. I hope you've learned something, and you know, if you want to find out any more information, you can just visit the Bat Conservation Trust website. They have lots and lots of great resources. You can join the Northern Ireland Bat Group and become a volunteer like me. And now all that's left to do is for you to get out there and find some bats yourself. So some places, I've wrote them down here so don't forget. There's Ecos in Ballymena. There's the Bashford Lands Wood in Carrickfergus, Diamond Jubilee Wood in Whitehead, Carnfunnick County Park, and Galgorm Wood in Cullybackey. Those are all great places to go and find bats, and it's now just getting down. It's now just becoming sunset, so I'm off to find some bats.